So, guys, welcome back to Kitaabi Keeda. In this, we are revising evolution of the Constitution. In our revision approach, we are going to go a little bit faster, and we are going to have super short notes, and hopefully, it will be helpful and it will give you the required notes for your prelims as well as for your mains. And at the end of the lecture, we will also have a few questions for you to practice on. So, let's dive in. So let's dive into the constitutional timeline. So this is a slide where I've tried to put together all of the major events that happened all the way from the ideation of the constitution to the adoption of the constitution. So let's go look at it one by one. So, idea of the Constitution was given by M.N. Roy in 1934. So basically, he was the first one who came up and said that India should have a constitution. Then the demand of a constitution was raised by the Indian National Congress in 1935. So after 1 year gap, right? 1934, 1935. Then Jawaharlal Nehru said that the constitution of free India must be framed without outside interference by the assembly elected on the basis of adult franchise. So this was the first time something resembling a constituent assembly was mentioned. Now, after that, the Indian National Congress passed a resolution of the same that they want a Constituent Assembly, which is going to be elected on the basis of adult franchise, right? Then came the August Offer, 1940, um, which was again based on this particular resolution. So, August Offer, right? After the August Offer, in 1942, Sir Sanford Cripps came up with Cripps proposal. So he came up with a proposal, which was obviously called Cripps proposal, to form Constituent Assembly. And this proposal was rejected by the Muslim League because they wanted a separate Muslim state, right? So after that, there was a cabinet mission sent in 1946, and we'll read a little bit more about each of these things as we progress in this lecture. Currently, let's just look at the timelines, right? So in 1946, cabinet mission was sent, and they formed another proposal for the Constituent Assembly, and that was then accepted by the Muslim League with some exceptions and all. Yeah, but Muslim League was able to accept that one. Then on 8th of July 1946, experts committee was formed. So after experts committee was formed on 1946 itself, July and August elections were held for the Constituent Assembly. And the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly then took place on 1st December 1946. And then on 13th December 1946, objective resolution was moved. So this was a resolution that was created by Jawaharlal Nehru. We'll talk more about it in our coming slides. On 22nd Jan 1947, unanimously the objective resolution was adopted. And then on 29th August 1947, drafting committee formed its first draft. So the Constituent Assembly had a drafting committee which had formed its first draft on 29 August 1947. So as you can see, the first draft of the Constitution was formed on this date, 29 August 1947, and then it took almost 1.5 years, right, to formally enforce the Constitution, which was on this date. So yeah. Next, on 14th November 1949, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar passed a motion to adopt the constitution, and on 26 November 1949, the constitution was adopted, but it was not fully enforced, it was partially enforced. And then on 26 Jan 1950, which is the date that we celebrate as the Republic Day, the constitution was completely enforced. Now let's take a deeper dive into the Cabinet Mission Plan. In the Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946, three members were there: Lord Pethick Lawrence, Sir Stafford Cripps, and A.V. Alexander. So, Cripps was the same person who came up with the Cripps proposal, which was rejected by the Muslim League, after which the cabinet mission had to be formed. So, what were the proposals of the cabinet mission? Are as follows. So, basically, principle of proportional representation, which essentially means that there was one seat per million population, and the entire British province were seats were divided in such a way that the number of people corresponded to the number of seats, and the seats were divided among Muslims, Sikhs, and general based on the proportion of their population in the British provinces. So, member of a community were to be elected by the same members of the community, which was like um, similar to a communal electorate, but that was not any official term used at that time. But that was the case, and again, that was they were elected by the principle of proportional representation by the means of single transferable vote. Now, in case of princely states, the representatives were nominated directly by the head of the princely state, right? So after the cabinet mission plan was accepted by Indian National Congress as well as the Muslim League, the before the elections were held, there was an experts committee formed. We'll read about it more in the coming slide, but just know that there was an experts committee formed after the cabinet mission plan was accepted. And basically, that experts committee came up with something similar to the objective resolution, which again we will read further. Going to the elections were held in July and August of 1946. So, in order to remember the dates, you can just start by remembering. So, we all know that in 47 we got our independence, right? So, a year before all of this was happening, and I think this would be easy for us to remember the date. So, in 1946 itself, we got the cabinet mission plan, and then elections were held in July and August of 1946. Indian National Congress got 208 seats, Muslim League got 73 seats, and 15 independent candidates were selected to be part of the Constituent Assembly. Now, princely states boycotted these elections, so the 93 seats that were given to them were left unallocated. So, the the Constituent Assembly contained people of all sections of society and all important personalities except Mahatma Gandhi. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi is what these initials mean. So, except him, all of the important personalities were part of the Constituent Assembly. So, before the elections were held, the experts committee was formed, as we've already talked about. And the objective of the committee was to come up with uh, some of the rules that are going to govern the uh, Constituent Assembly that is going to be formed eventually. So it came up with something which is similar to the objective resolution, and we'll talk more about the objective resolution, right? So the members of the experts committee were Jawaharlal Nehru, um, M. Asaf Ali, uh, K. M. Munshi, N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, K. T. Shah, D. R. Gadgil, Humayun Kabir, K. Santhanam, and Jawaharlal Nehru was the chairman. So the Constituent Assembly was formed after the elections held in July and August. The first meeting of the Constituent Assembly was held on 9th December 1946, and there were 207 attendees. It was boycotted by the Muslim League, and the chair of the assembly was decided to be Dr. Sachidanand Sinha on the basis of French practice. So, it is a common French practice that whoever is the oldest member of a committee is selected to be the chair of the committee, and that is why Dr. Sachidanand was selected to be the chair in the first meeting. And eventually, the elections for the chair or the president was held, and on 11th December, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the permanent chair of the Constituent Assembly. On 25th January, H.C. Mukherjee elected as vice president. And on 16th July, V.T. Krishnamachari was elected as the second vice president. Okay. So there were two vice president after that. Um, then the objective resolution, it was formed on 19th, sorry, on 13th December 1946. The objective resolution was formed, and it was basically the philosophy of the Constitution. It was a conscience of the Constitution. It was the moral of the Constitution. It talked about what should be the morals of the Constitution. That is why the objective resolution was formed. And on 22nd Jan 1947, it was unanimously adopted by the Assembly. 13 December formed and 26th Jan adopted by the Constituent Assembly. So we all know that the Indian Independence Act was commenced on 15th of August 1947. So after the Indian Independence Act, the Constituent Assembly became a completely sovereign body. Sovereign means it was not dependent on anybody else. It could make its own decisions. Yeah. So, and also the act made it as a legislative body as well. So basically, now the Constituent Assembly was to be uh, basically there were two functions of the Constituent Assembly. One was to form the constitution, of course, and the second function was to do legislation till a legislative assembly is elected by whatever constitution is formed according to those rules, right? So till then, till a proper constitution is in place, the Constituent Assembly acted as the legislative body as well. And when the Constituent Assembly sat as the constituent body, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the chair. As we talked about earlier, he was elected on 11th December 1946. And when this body sat as the legislative body, then G.V. Mavlankar was the chair. So when it's a constituent body, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. When it's a legislative body, G.V. Mavlankar. Right? This is something we need to remember. Then Muslim League withdrew from the Constituent Assembly and the seats were then reduced. Those seats went to Pakistan. Now let's talk about the objective resolution. So, what you see here are some of the key features of the objective resolution. It talked about that the constitution that shall be formed must work towards an independent and sovereign India. It should promote the peace and welfare of the country. It should safeguard the minority and tribal backward classes, and the objective resolution also became the basis of the preamble of the constitution. Um, then uh, it should provide freedom of thought and expression. It should provide justice, social and political and economic. So some of the things you will see exactly put in the preamble, and all the power should be derived from the people. So if you read the preamble before, you would see that it starts with we the people of India, right? So that means it derives its power from the people of the country, from the population. So that was the objective resolution. Talk about the functions of the Constituent Assembly. So some of the tasks that it did, other than, of course, forming the Constitution, was that in May of 1949, it ratified India's membership in the Commonwealth. On 22nd July 1947, it adopted the national flag. On 24th January 1950, it adopted the national anthem. And also on 24th January 1950, adopted the national song Vande Mataram. And on 24th January 1950 again, also elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first president of India. So you remember these three dates, the 24th Jan 1950, of course, by 26th Jan, 2 days before 26th January, we adopted the national anthem, we adopted the national song, and elected Rajendra Prasad as the first president of India. And yeah, I mean, and you'll have to remember National Flag Date and the Commonwealth ratification date, which is an earlier date. Right? So, in total, the Constituent Assembly sat for 11 sessions over the period of 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days. Right? And it went through the constitution of 60 countries for inspirations, and basically took the good parts of those and converted them to suit the needs of the Indian population, and remove the errors in the constitutions and use them for ourselves. The total expenditure was 64 lakh, which you can imagine how less it is compared to the how it would have taken in a time like now. And in the final session was held on 24th Jan 1950 again. So when the national anthem, national song was adopted, that is when what was the final session of the Constituent Assembly. And after that, of course, it started to um, uh, as the first parliament till the first general election. So after being a Constituent Assembly, it continued its work as the provisional parliament till the first general election was held in the year 1951 and 52. Let's briefly go through some of the committees that were formed in the Constituent Assembly. So we will go through the major committees one by one, and I'll just leave this here for you to take a screenshot of the minor committees formed. In the minor committees, only two are more important. I would say one is the Finance and Staff Committee, which was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad himself. And then there is the Linguistic Provisions Committee, which was chaired by S.K. Dar. He's not an assembly member, but he was chairing this as an expert. Coming to the major committees, so The Union Powers Committee and the Union Constitution Committee was led by Dr. Jawaharlal Nehru himself. So, and also the States Committee. So, let's see. Both the union committees that are there in the major committee list were held by Jawaharlal Nehru, and the States Committee also was chaired by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So we can remember that most of the power was with him because he was the prime minister, right? We can remember it like that. So, of course, if he is the prime minister, so you would have union powers, you would have union constitution, and state committee would be led by you, of course, right? So that's how we remember union powers, union constitution, state committee led by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Coming to the steering committee and rules of procedure committee. So steering committee and rules of procedure committee were led by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was the president. So we can remember steering committee, rules of procedure committee, and finance and staff committee, right? Those were chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was the president. So we know Prime Minister led Union Powers, Union Constitution, State Committee, and the President led Steering Committee, Rules of Procedure Committee, and Finance and Staff Committee. Right? Makes sense. Coming to the drafting committee, I think it's very easy to remember. We all know Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is called the father of the Constitution. He was chairing the drafting committee. Then we have two major committees that are led by Sardar Patel. There's Provincial Constitution Committee and Advisory Committee for Fundamental Rights, Minorities, Tribals, and Excluded Areas. So there are certain subcommittees inside this committee. So you could remember the big, large committee was led by Sardar Patel, and the Provincial Constitution Committee was led by Sardar Patel. The Union Constitution led by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, but Provincial Constitution led by Sardar Patel. So let's look at the subcommittees of this committee. So the entire name actually has the names of the subcommittees only. Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights. So there's one subcommittee called Fundamental Rights Subcommittee. Minorities, so there's one minorities subcommittee. Tribal and excluded areas committee. So we have there were certain sections that were divided in these. So there is northeastern frontier tribal areas, and there is northwestern frontier tribal areas. So of course there's tribals, but tribals are divided into two. So northeast frontier tribal areas and excluded and partially excluded areas in Assam. Northeast tribal plus excluded in Assam, right? Then northwest frontal tribal areas is one section. Then excluded and partially excluded areas other than Assam, because Assam was already covered in the northeast frontal this subcommittee, right? So there are five subcommittees that were under this, which was led by Sardar Patel. So I hope this would be easy for you to remember it like this. Now let's take a little deeper dive into the drafting committee and who are the members and how it functions and how much time it took. So let's look at the members. Of course, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the chairman of this committee, and he's also called the chief architect of the Constitution or the father of the Constitution. Then N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, Alladi Krishnamachari Iyer, Dr. K.M. Munshi, Syed Muhammad Sadullah, N. Madhav Rao, and T.T. Krishnamachari. So these were the members of the drafting committee. And so the first time this committee was set up was on 29th August 1947 after the elections. The first draft was published on 1947 February, and then this draft was left for public suggestions for 8 months. in which the public opinions were collected. And based on those, the second draft was prepared on October 1948. All in all, this committee sat for 141 days over a period of 6 months, and it adopted the constitution on 29 November 1949. This is when few of the articles were adopted, and this day is celebrated as Samvidhan Divas since 2015. You don't need to remember the exact date, but since November 2015, it was declared to be celebrated as Samvidhan Divas. The first constitution that was adopted had a preamble. It had 395 articles and 8 schedules. And now we will talk about the last three articles that were there. So, Article 393 says that it gives the short title to the Constitution. It is called the Constitution of India. That's all the Article 393 is. Then, Article 394, it talks about what are the articles that came into force on 26 November 1949. And uh, it was this article, sorry, yeah, so it talks about what were the articles that would come into being on 26 November 1949, and it also says that the remaining articles would um, be enforced on 26 January 1950. So this date was intentionally selected, and it was given in in this article that the complete constitution would be adopted on 26 January 1950. This was given as the date. So, and why this date was chosen is that on 1930, 26 Jan, the same day, Purna Swaraj was celebrated by Indian National Congress, because it that was the day when Lahore session was Indian National Congress's resolution in the Lahore session was held on that same day, 26 Jan 1930. And right after 20 years of that, on 26 Jan 1950, the complete constitution was to be adopted on Purna Swaraj Divas. Okay. Then coming to the last article, this talks about the repealing of the British laws, which were the Government of India Act 1935 and um, Indian Independence Act 1947. Both of these were now repealed after the Constitution is adopted, other than the abolition of Privy Council Jurisdiction Act. What this means is that the Privy Council, which is the supreme um, council of Britain, had jurisdiction over India before, but it was abolished as part of the Independence Act, and this part of it was still continued, and the Privy Council does not have any jurisdiction over India. That was continued. Let's quickly talk about some facts regarding the Constituent Assembly. So, the seal of the Constituent Assembly is an elephant. I think we could remember this because B.R. Ambedkar is associated with the elephant symbol, right? Then we have the legal counsel. His name was B.N. Rao. The secretary was H.V.R. Iyengar. The chief draftsman was S.N. Mukherjee. In the original version, the calligraphy was done by Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada. So this was the English version, and Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada had done the English version calligraphy of our constitution. The illustrations were done by some of the artists from Shanti Niketan. The names were Nandlal Bose, Bevhar Ram Manohar Sinha. These people illustrated so Bevhar Ram Manohar Sinha illustrated the preamble, and Nandlal and Bevhar together illustrated the constitution. In the Hindi version, the calligraphy was done by Vasant Krishan Vaidya, and the illustration was done again by Nandalal Bose. So Nandalal Bose did illustrations on both. Um, in the 50th amendment, the Article 394A was added in the part 22nd of the Constitution, and under President, all provisions and articles were to be translated, and it was to be ensured that they had the same meaning as there is in English. And if in case of any discrepancy, the original, which is in English, was to be preferred. So, this is just an image taken from the Lakshmikant book. This is the list of the women members of Constituent Assembly, and why I've taken this is because you can take your time and make like 1 or 2 line notes on a few members here, because that could be used in the mains exam for sure, because it's a separate topic. Women's issues, even you can use some quotes from these women, some examples of how they were crucial in the making of the constitution, how they were crucial as social members of the country. You could use those examples in your answer writing. So you could take a screenshot, or you could just have your Lakshmikant and try to make few notes on these. So now we will talk about the criticisms of the Constituent Assembly, and this could also be related to the criticism of the Constitution itself. And we will talk about that more when we talk about the features of the Constitution, which is going to be our next chapter. So let's go through these, and we'll have more detail about the Constitution's criticisms in the next chapter. So it was said that it is not a representative body, and why it was said is because it was not a pure election that was held to elect these members. Like for example, in order to select members from provinces, the uh, province head was nominating the members. So it was not a purely elective body, and also not like it was not complete franchise to elect the members as well. So, and they were not directly elected, right? They were elected from the elected members. So that is why it was not direct election. That is why it's said to be not a representative body. Then it is also said that it is not a sovereign body because it was created by the British resolution. Um, then it is also, in a slang way, said to be a drifting committee instead of drafting committee by Nasiruddin Ahmad, because according to him, it was a very slow process. It took 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days, as we've seen earlier, and 11 sessions for the committee to actually draft the constitution. And compared to America, that only took 4 months. So that is um, how it was called a drifting committee. And here are a few examples of how much time the other countries took to form the constitution. As you can see, USA took 4 months, Canada took 2 years and 6 months, which is a lot. And you would see that a lot of the provisions in Indian constitution are taken from Canada itself, which is like for example, a strong union, um, and all those features are taken from Canada. We'll talk about it when we talk about the features. And Australia took 9 years, South Africa took 1 year, right? Then it is said that it was Congress dominated, which means that the Indian National Congress was the major membership of the Constituent Assembly, which is true. And it was also said that Assembly was Congress and the Congress was India. Then it has a lawyer politician dominated bias, so that is also said to be the reason why it is a bulky document, our constitution, because a lot of the language is very lawyer-friendly language with all of the conditions met. So it's a complicated and bulky language, if that is one of the criticisms. And it is also said it is Hindu dominated. It is said that the Constituent Assembly represented only one major community in India. It was said by Winston Churchill himself, who was the British Prime Minister at the time. Now for the fun part, here are two questions from previous year's prelims, and I want you guys to see if you are able to answer these questions, and hopefully you would be able to. And if not, of course, you can do your own research, and that is the best way of learning. And I want you to comment those answers, and let's see who gets it right, right? So in 2019 prelims, it was asked that which, with reference to the Indian national movement, consider the following pairs. Tej Bahadur Sapro, President, K.C. Neogi, Member of the Constituent Assembly, P.C. Joshi, General Secretary, Communist Party of India. So you have to tell which of these pairs are correctly matched, and your options are 1 only, 1 and 2, 3 only, and 1, 2, and 3. Then you have who among the following was the chairman of the Union Constitution Committee of the Constituent Assembly? And this was asked in 2005 prelims. Your options are B.R. Ambedkar, J.B. Kriplani, Jawaharlal Nehru, Alladi Krishnamachari, Iyer. So give me your answers in the comments. And yeah, let's see you in the other video. Thank you for watching this video. And I hope you're able to learn something, and I hope that your revisions are going well. All the best for the exams.